Listen, every single one of us wakes up with the exact same currency 24 hours. No one gets 25. No one gets 23. Some people use that time to build empires, transform their bodies, multiply their income, and reinvent their lives, while others burn it on distractions, excuses, and comfort. The difference isn't intelligence, talent, or luck. The difference is how you treat your day. Your 24 hours are either a weapon or a wall. And the moment you understand that everything in your life begins to shift, most people think they need more time, but what they actually need is more clarity. They don't lose because they're weak. They lose because they wake up with no target. When you don't decide your day decides you. And the world will always fill your schedule with noise, chaos, and meaningless tasks if you don't take control first. A genius doesn't wait for the perfect moment. He engineers it. He builds discipline brick by brick, decision by decision, hour by hour. Most people walk through life believing they're drowning in responsibilities, but the truth is they're drowning in indecision. When you don't know what matters, everything feels urgent, everything feels important, everything feels heavy. Clarity is the filter that separates progress from noise. Without it, your brain becomes a battlefield of scattered priorities, fake emergencies, and constant reactivity. You don't need more hours, you need sharper direction. The moment you define what actually moves your life forward, the chaos shrinks and your confidence expands because you finally know where your effort belongs. Clarity turns your day from a messy list of random tasks into a focused mission. When you wake up knowing exactly what the next step is, you stop wasting mental energy deciding, debating, or delaying. You execute, you move, you build momentum. Most people lose half their productivity not because they're lazy, but because they're mentally juggling 1,000 ideas and finishing none. Clarity kills that mental noise. It gives you a single target to hit instead of 10 blurry ones that drain your attention. Overwhelm is a symptom of unclear priorities. When everything seems equally important, you end up doing the easiest tasks, the most comfortable ones, or the ones that distract you from what truly matters. And that destroys progress. Clarity forces you to confront the truth. Not everything deserves your time. Not every task deserves your energy, and not every problem deserves your attention. When you finally accept that your workload doesn't shrink, your stress does. Clarity also removes emotional friction. You stop battling yourself. When you know exactly what needs to be done, you stop negotiating with your mood, your motivation, or your fears. The question shifts from, do I feel like it? To, is it aligned with the mission? That's how people shift from inconsistent to unstoppable. They stop relying on feelings and start relying on direction. When you eliminate ambiguity, discipline becomes easier because you're not wasting willpower figuring out what to do. Your brain is built to conserve energy, which means it hates confusion. When your priorities are unclear, your brain slows down, resists action, and looks for distractions because they're easier than making decisions. Clarity flips the switch. It gives your brain a straight line to follow. You free up mental bandwidth, reduce resistance, and increase speed. Suddenly, tasks that once felt heavy now feel simple because your mind isn't wandering, it's locked in. Clarity multiplies execution. When you know the goal, you make better decisions, faster moves, and cleaner actions. You stop overthinking and start producing. You stop planning endlessly and start doing strategically. People who look like geniuses aren't smarter, they're clearer. They know exactly what they want, why they want it, and what steps lead there. That certainty creates a level of output that looks superhuman to people who are still guessing their way through the day. Clarity is also the foundation of confidence. You trust yourself more when you know where you're going. You act boldly because you're not hoping, you're aiming. Your progress becomes measurable. Your growth becomes visible, and your results become predictable. The more clarity you have, the faster your life accelerates because you're no longer spending time on things that don't compound. When your time is guided by clarity, you stop living reactively and start living intentionally. Every minute has purpose. Every decision has weight. Every action has alignment. And suddenly, you realize overwhelm was never the real enemy. Lack of direction was. Clarity doesn't give you more hours, but it makes the hours you already have exponentially more powerful. Your environment silently shapes the person you become because whether you notice it or not, everything around you is influencing your focus, your energy, your ambition, and your habits. The people you talk to, the conversations you entertain, the room you work in, the distractions you allow, and the standards you tolerate all send signals to your brain about what is normal. When your environment is filled with noise, negativity, and low expectations, your mind adapts downward. When it's filled with purpose, momentum, and high standards, your mind adapts upward. You cannot consistently outperform the environment you live in because your environment sets the emotional and psychological tone that determines how you show up every day. A powerful environment multiplies your results without increasing your effort. It gives you clarity, direction, and space to think at a higher level. When you're surrounded by people who push themselves, you naturally push yourself harder. When you're in spaces that support focus, you work faster and with more depth. When your surroundings reflect your goals instead of your past, your identity shifts and you start behaving like the person you intend to become. The right environment doesn't force you to be disciplined. It makes discipline the easiest option. It eliminates the friction between who you are and who you're trying to be. But when your environment is filled with distractions, complacency, and emotional clutter, it becomes a parasite that quietly drains you. You waste energy resisting temptations that shouldn't even be in your line of sight. You spend attention managing drama that has nothing to do with your growth. You lose momentum because everything around you pulls you back to your old patterns. A bad environment doesn't destroy you in one moment. It eats away at you slowly until you're too exhausted to chase the life you want. It's not always obvious because the destruction is subtle, but over time, it compounds into a life you never intended to live. The hardest part is admitting that some of the people closest to you may not support your potential, not because they want to hurt you, but because your growth makes them uncomfortable. They prefer the version of you that doesn't challenge them. And if you're not careful, you'll shrink yourself to maintain those relationships. Your environment isn't just physical, it's emotional. The words you hear, the attitudes you witness, and the behaviors you absorb all shape your internal narrative. If you surround yourself with people who don't believe in growth, you'll unconsciously mirror their limits. To create a stronger environment, you need to build a filter, not a fence. A filter lets the right influences in and keeps the wrong ones out. It means reducing your exposure to negative conversations, unproductive habits, and people who drain your ambition. It means designing your space so it supports your goals, not your impulses. It means structuring your day so you're constantly nudged toward progress rather than comfort. Your environment should make the wrong choices hard and the right choices easy, because that's how you create consistency without relying on motivation. A high-performance environment also demands responsibility. It forces you to hold yourself to a higher standard because everything around you reflects the identity you're stepping into. When your surroundings tell you that excellence is the baseline, you stop settling. You audit your habits. You upgrade your behavior. You eliminate excuses because your environment no longer supports them. You start aligning your actions with your goals automatically because the space you operate in reinforces your purpose. Over time, your environment becomes a mirror of your ambition. The cleaner it is, the clearer you think. The quieter it is, the deeper you focus. The more supportive it is, the faster you grow. You begin to see how much energy you use to waste just surviving your surroundings instead of building your future. When your environment multiplies your strength instead of draining it, your productivity feels effortless because you're no longer fighting obstacles you created for yourself. The truth is, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you rise to the level of your environment. When everything around you is designed to support your direction, growth becomes your default state. Your habits strengthen, your discipline sharpens, your focus intensifies, and your potential expands. Your environment isn't just a backdrop, it's the engine that either drives your success or sabotages it from the inside out. Most people lose their entire day in the first hour because they start with negotiation instead of commitment. They wake up and immediately bargain with themselves about whether they should get up, whether they should work, whether they should push, whether they should honor the plan they made when they were thinking clearly. And every time they choose the easier option, they reinforce the identity of someone who can be convinced out of their own goals. The negotiation becomes a habit, a reflex, a daily ritual of talking themselves out of the life they say they want. The problem isn't their ability, it's the silent conversations they allow in their mind. When you constantly negotiate with yourself, you create a pattern of hesitation that kills momentum. You train your brain to treat your commitments as suggestions instead of non-negotiables. The moment you give yourself the option to bail, your mind will take it, not because you're weak, but because the human brain is designed to seek comfort and minimize discomfort. So if you leave the door open, your thoughts will escape through it. This is why people feel stuck. They're not failing because they lack discipline. They're failing because they keep giving themselves a vote in moments where only action should exist. The shift happens the day you decide your word to yourself is final. You stop weighing every decision. You stop debating your own instructions. You stop trying to feel ready. Instead, you execute because execution is who you are. When you remove the option to negotiate, you remove 90% of your internal resistance. The task becomes simple. Do it because you said you would. That clarity removes emotional friction and frees up energy that used to be spent arguing with your own mind. You gain power because you finally stop leaking it. Most people assume discipline is about motivation, but it's actually about identity. When you see yourself as someone who always follows through, your actions become automatic. You don't struggle to start because starting is just part of who you are. You don't debate whether you should do the hard things because you've conditioned yourself to default to action. And the more consistently you honor your own decisions, the more confidence you build. You begin to trust yourself, and that trust becomes the foundation of self-respect. Negotiation with yourself also drains time. People underestimate the energy cost of indecision. Every minute spent discussing whether you should do something is a minute you could have spent doing it. That constant back and forth eats up willpower, lowers focus, and creates mental fatigue before the real work even begins. This is why so many people feel exhausted without having accomplished anything. They didn't do more, they just argued more. And those tiny arguments compound until the day is gone. There's a freedom that comes when you decide your choices are made ahead of time, when you decide your workouts are not optional, when you decide your work blocks are non-negotiable. When you decide your goals matter more than your mood, the structure becomes your strength. The decisions you made when you were clear-eyed and focused guide you when you're tired, stressed, or tempted. This is how you build consistency that outlasts emotion and conditions you to operate at a higher level. What most people don't realize is that negotiation isn't just a habit, it's a slow erosion of self-belief. Every time you tell yourself you'll do something and don't follow through, you quietly teach your mind that your own words aren't reliable. You weaken your internal authority. You make promises sound cheap. And soon, even when you say you're committed, your mind doesn't believe you. The cycle continues until you break it by choosing decisive action over mental bargaining. That single decision creates a ripple effect through every area of your life. The moment you stop negotiating with yourself, your entire system recalibrates. Your actions become sharper, your time becomes cleaner, your focus becomes stronger. You start moving through your day with certainty instead of confusion, with intention instead of impulse. You eliminate the noise that used to slow you down and replace it with a quiet, steady sense of power. Because once you refuse to bargain with your lesser impulses, you leave no room for excuses, and you finally step into the version of yourself that you were capable of becoming all along. Most people are drowning not because their lives are too full, but because they're cluttered with things that don't matter. Their schedules look packed, but very little of it actually moves them forward. They confuse being busy with being effective, and every extra task they add becomes another anchor tied to their progress. When you try to carry everything, you end up moving slower, thinking slower, and acting slower. The truth is, productivity isn't about stacking more on your plate. It's about scraping off everything that doesn't serve your mission. The more unnecessary weight you remove, the faster and free you move, and the quicker your results compound. Your brain was never designed to manage dozens of priorities at once. It thrives when it has a narrow point of focus, not scattered attention. Every time you jump between low-value tasks, you pay a mental tax that drains energy, clarity, and momentum. That's why your day feels chaotic even when you're working hard. You're not overwhelmed because the work is difficult. You're overwhelmed because too much of it is meaningless. When you strip away the noise, you reclaim the cognitive bandwidth to think deeply, execute powerfully, and create results instead of stress. Noise shows up in subtle ways. It's the pointless notifications, the trivial messages, the tasks that feel urgent but aren't important, the meetings that lead nowhere, and the routines that exist only because they're familiar. Noise disguises itself as productivity because it makes you feel active, but activity without direction is the fastest way to waste your potential. Removing noise takes honesty. Honesty about what's actually helping you and what's just keeping you distracted. And when you're willing to confront that truth, everything begins to simplify. Subtraction forces clarity. When you remove the 97% of things that don't matter, the remaining 3% becomes impossible to ignore. These are the actions that actually move your life forward. These are the habits that create progress. These are the decisions that compound into results. When you operate from a place of intentional simplicity instead of chaotic abundance, the essentials rise to the surface and receive the attention they deserve. You stop scattering effort and start applying pressure where it counts most. The people who achieve extraordinary outcomes don't do more, they do less, but they do it with ruthless consistency. They pick their highest leverage actions and double down on them without being pulled in 1,000 directions. They build systems that eliminate decision fatigue and routines that minimize distractions. They understand that doing fewer things extremely well produces far more success than doing many things half-heartedly. When your focus tightens, your output expands because your mind isn't diluted by noise, it's concentrated on impact. You also discover that eliminating noise creates emotional clarity. You stop feeling guilty about unfinished tasks because the tasks that remain actually matter. You stop feeling pulled in multiple directions because your direction becomes singular. You stop feeling mentally exhausted because your brain isn't juggling pointless obligations. Instead, you're fueled by the momentum of meaningful progress. This shift is subtle at first, but over time it becomes a defining factor in your growth. When you reduce the noise in your life, your identity upgrades. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is busy and start seeing yourself as someone who is effective. Your standards rise because your actions are now aligned with your purpose, not your distractions. You begin trusting yourself more because you're no longer drowning in self-created chaos. Every day feels cleaner, sharper, and more controlled because the clutter that once blurred your path is gone. The greatest breakthroughs in life often come from subtraction, not addition. When you take away the noise, you uncover the path that was always there but buried under layers of obligations, distractions, and unnecessary commitments. You uncover the work that truly matters. You uncover the actions that actually transform you. And you uncover the clarity that allows you to move through your day with precision, power, and a level of focus that most people never experience. Most people think success belongs to the talented, the gifted, the naturally brilliant, but the truth is far less glamorous. Success belongs to the one who shows up every single day, long after the excitement fades, long after the motivation disappears, long after the results slow down. Talent creates early momentum, but consistency builds empires. The person who does the work every day, even when it feels repetitive and boring, will always outperform the person who only performs when it feels good. Consistency is the great equalizer because it transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary outcomes through sheer repetition. When you show up consistently, you build a rhythm that carries you forward even when your mood doesn't cooperate. You stop relying on emotional spikes to get moving because the action becomes a part of your identity. The disciplined person doesn't ask, "Do I feel like it today?" They ask, "What needs to get done?" That simple shift separates the ones who achieve long-term success from the ones who burn out after a week of inspiration. Consistency becomes a stabilizing force, a quiet engine that keeps your life moving even when everything else feels chaotic. The people who seem unstoppable aren't running on unlimited motivation. They've built systems that eliminate the need for motivation in the first place. They've conditioned themselves to follow through regardless of resistance. Every day of consistent action strengthens the neural pathways that make the behavior easier and more automatic. What was once difficult becomes effortless. What once required discipline becomes habit. And what once felt like optional effort becomes the standard you hold yourself to without thinking. Consistency also builds a level of confidence that talent alone can never provide. When you know you can rely on yourself to show up every day, you stop doubting your ability to succeed. You trust your work ethic. You trust your habits. You trust your resilience. Every completed day becomes evidence that you're capable of more. Over time, this self-trust replaces fear, hesitation, and insecurity because you're no longer hoping you'll succeed. You're proving it through your actions on a daily basis. The compounding effect of consistency is what creates breakthroughs. One workout doesn't change your body, but 100 do. One day of learning doesn't transform your mind, but months of repetition do. One disciplined decision doesn't shift your life, but thousands of them eventually realign your entire trajectory. Most people underestimate how powerful small actions become when repeated relentlessly. They quit too early because they can't see the invisible progress that's building beneath the surface. What looks like overnight success is almost always the result of years of consistent effort happening quietly behind the scenes. Nobody sees the early mornings, the late nights, the repetition, the discipline, the setbacks, or the persistence required to keep going. They only see the result and assume it came from natural talent. But true growth takes time, and consistency is the mechanism that transforms delayed gratification into visible accomplishment. Talent may get you noticed, but consistency keeps you moving long enough to win. Consistency demands patience, and patience is one of the rarest strengths in a world addicted to immediate results. You have to be willing to keep showing up even when nothing appears to be changing. You have to trust the process, even when the progress is invisible. You have to keep investing effort long before the payoff arrives. That level of commitment and perseverance is what separates those who talk about success from those who actually achieve it. In every field, in every discipline, in every pursuit, the people who rise to the top aren't always the most talented. They're the most consistent. They endure longer. They push through boredom. They keep refining their craft, and they refuse to break the chain of daily effort. They understand that greatness isn't created in dramatic moments of brilliance, but in the quiet, repetitive work done day after day, long after most people have stopped trying. Every day you wake up with a currency more valuable than money, more powerful than opportunity, and more limited than anything you will ever own in your 24 hours. Most people treat this currency like loose change, letting it fall through their fingers, spending it on impulse, distraction, and whatever feels easy in the moment. They operate like gamblers, hoping something will pay off, hoping luck will strike, hoping their future somehow improves without intentional investment. But time doesn't reward hope, it rewards allocation. The way you spend your hours determines the quality of your life, because nothing compounds faster, positively or negatively, than the way you use your time. When you treat your day like an investment portfolio, everything changes. You start to look at where your hours are going, what they're producing, and whether they're generating long-term returns or just temporary comfort. You begin to realize that most of the things you give your time to don't pay you back. They cost you. They drain your energy, dilute your focus, and rob you of momentum that could have been directed into something meaningful. You become more conscious, more selective, and more strategic because you finally see time as a resource that either multiplies your life or erodes it. High-value hours are spent on actions that shape your future, building skills, improving your health, strengthening your mindset, creating opportunities, and solving problems that expand your capacity. These hours compound quietly. You don't see the rewards immediately, but they build beneath the surface like interest accumulating in an account. Eventually, they erupt into visible success, and people call it luck, but you know it was built hour by hour through deliberate investment. You created the outcome through choices that seemed small in the moment, but massive over time. Low-value hours are easier to spend because they require nothing from you. They feel good now, but cost you later. Scrolling, procrastination, gossip, entertainment, cheap dopamine, they give you a short burst of relief, but leave you worse off than before. These are the hours that generate regret. They add nothing to your future and quietly take everything from your potential. You don't feel the loss immediately, which makes them dangerous. But over months and years, they accumulate into a version of your life you never asked for. Treating your time like an investment forces you to evaluate the true cost of your choices. Every hour spent on distraction is an hour stolen from growth. Every hour spent on excuses is an hour stolen from progress. Every hour spent avoiding discomfort is an hour stolen from the version of you that could have existed. Time doesn't ask for permission to pass. It doesn't wait for your readiness. It doesn't care about your mood. It simply continues, and the only question is whether it's working for you or against you. When you operate like a millionaire with your hours, you start placing them where they create leverage. You spend your mornings on your highest priorities, not your easiest tasks. You fill your environment with focus instead of noise. You protect your attention like it's worth millions because it is. You stop trading hours for instant gratification and start trading them for long-term power. You value your future more than your impulses. And that single shift separates the people who build extraordinary lives from the people who settle for ordinary ones. The more intentionally you invest your time, the more your life accelerates. You start seeing forward movement in areas that felt stuck for years. You build momentum that carries you through resistance. You see opportunities that you were blind to before because your mind is no longer cluttered. You create space to think, to plan, to execute, to refine. And as your results grow, your standards rise. You become someone who refuses to waste hours because you understand how costly they truly are and how powerful they can become when used with purpose. At some point, you look back and realize your daily decisions created everything you're now experiencing. The good, the bad, the strong, the weak, the returns reflect the investments. Time never lies. It pays you in the exact currency you've earned. And once you understand that every hour is either compounding into a better life or quietly slipping away, you begin treating every moment like the asset it truly is. You've heard enough strategies, you've had enough ideas, you've collected more information than you'll ever need. The question now is whether you will finally act on it, because nothing in your life changes until you decide you're done living the same day on repeat. You don't need more time, more motivation, or more inspiration. You need a decision, a real one. The kind that burns the exit routes, kills the excuses, and forces you to show up differently tomorrow than you did today. At some point, you have to stop admiring the idea of a better life and start doing the work that builds it. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop bargaining with your potential. Stop letting comfort drag you back to the version of yourself you're trying to outgrow. If you want momentum, create it. If you want clarity, earn it. If you want transformation, commit to it with the kind of intensity that leaves no room for your old habits to survive. Your 24 hours tomorrow hold the same power as the people you admire. They aren't chosen, gifted, or lucky. They're decisive. They move before they're ready. They act before they feel confident. They build discipline in the dark when no one is watching. And if you do the same, your life will compound in ways you can't even imagine. But it starts with a single step, one bold action that signals to yourself, I'm done playing small. So take that step. Take it today. Take it now. Because once you finally choose to rise, nothing can keep you where you've been.